Hello everyone and welcome to test 5 discussion which was centered on GS paper number 3. And now before starting the test guys, please always remember that when the going gets tough, only the tough gets going. And by any means, you don't need to get tired. You need to be the one who's tough. Always remember whenever you are writing the test, remember the face of your parents who have bestowed entire their lives on you becoming an IS officer. Remember your dream with which you entered into this study. Remember what you can give into the society. And I think that will be the force which will keep you going into this particular endeavor. I know that a writing test can be lethargic, it can be monotonous, it can be tiring, but guys, the one who shies away with the hard work can't ever achieve something substantial into his or her life. So please don't get bored by the pressure, by the miseries, by the hardships, be it the COVID 19. Show this the world that you have the will to conquer your dream and you had conquered it in 2020 itself. Show the world what you are made up of. Show them the spine which you are carrying into the tiry eyes, into the tiry emotions. Show what you are capable of. Guys, please keep this thing in your mind and never tire, because the destiny can't be reached by the people who have excuse of tiring or lethargy. And now let's start the discussion. And the question number one was on EIA. It says that if practiced in an efficient manner, EIA can be a warning bell in averting the major environmental crisis. Do you think that EIA has been utilized efficiently in India, specifically under the light of newly introduced amendments in EIA? Now, first of all, many of you might be doing a mistake, that is writing everything you know about the EIA, writing all the processes steps into the EIA, but actually that is not required. What you need to do in intro, you need to provide just a 2 to 3 line concept with respect to the EIA. For example, we can say that environmental impact assessment is a mechanism to evaluate the sustainability of a project on the parameters such as environmental sustainability, respecting the rights of the nearby indigenous communities, and third, it should be sustainable onto the disaster resilience also. Now, guys, the EIA concept came in 1978-79, but it was notified formally to be conducted only in 1994. But the comprehensive rules with respect to the EIA was formed in 2006, and various categories were listed where the EIA is necessary and where EIA might be bypassed. And till now, the 2006 rules are regulating the affairs and matters in respect of EIA. And in mean course of time, many a times EIA has been appreciated by the agencies such as UNDP as well as by the National Green Tribunal, because it has upheld the democratic process. Now, a general EIA process looks like this. Guys, first of all, application with respect to the EIA is submitted. Then it could either be a non-feasible project, so it doesn't goes forward. Then there could be a requirement of EIA, that is category A. Then there could be a limited EIA which might be required, that is category B. All these categories are clearly written into the 2006 EIA rules. Then guys, there could be certain projects which doesn't require the EIA as they might be environmentally friendly, so there it is not required and directly the project could be started. However, the most complex process starts into the EIA regular category. So guys, these are the steps. If you want, you can see into this particular thing. However, they are not required into the present scope of question. So if you want, you can pause the video and see the elaborate steps. Now, if you remember, earlier I had told you that it has been appreciated by the UNDP as well as NGT. Why? Because the intentions that are contained in 2006 EIA has been noble. However, many a times they have been violated. And the most recent example we can take of 2016, when the Char Dham project started without obtaining the necessary EIA. Moreover, guys, the But 2013 Uttarakhand floods are the testimonials that how if a proper EIA of project is not carried and if unplanned development into the sensitive zone is carried, that what could be the tune of the devastations. So guys, if a proper EIA can be carried, then it can be a warning bell, and in advance it can notify the impending disasters and the steps could be taken. Moreover, the Himalayan region and the northeastern region happens to be a seismically active zone. So the importance of EIA into these regions become even more important. But as from the example of Char Dham and various other examples, the government had not utilized this sufficiently, and even the spirit is now being more diluted by the introduction of 2020 EIA rules because of certain points. Number 1, EIA has always been appreciated for the participatory process, and particularly into the Samarth Trust judgment, Delhi High Court has considered EIA as a part of participatory justice and had called it as a Jan Sunwai where the voice to the voiceless is given. Why? Because it focuses on to the participatory approval for a particular project, but the same provision is being violated in 2020 EIA rules because the number of days in which people can give their approval for a project has been reduced from 30 to 20 days. So guys, the Jan Sunwai will be impacted. Now the second problem into the 2020 EIA rule is the introduction of ex post facto clearance route, where it has been said that a construction of a project can started even before taking the EIA approval. And we know that even if the project is not suitable on EIA and it has been constructed, then there will be foregoing by imposing the penalties and monetary fines. But guys, what about the cost of the hazard that will be coming if it causes some environmental devastation or havoc? So simply it is the silencing of the warning bell for which EIA was meant. Now, guys, the third problem is that there is the large exemption category which has been introduced. Earlier, the project of defense orientation were already exempted, but a new category has been added, that is the project of the strategic consideration. And in this strategic consideration, the scope has been left wide and vague. So, therefore, large number of units to whomsoever government want can qualify. And fourthly, guys, we had seen that there are certain projects which need the full assessment, certain are ones which need the partial assessment. So the number of projects which require the full assessment has been reduced and various construction projects have been given the only partial approval route. So, guys, these are the notable parameters on which we can say that the 2020 EIA rules is nothing but an attempt to institutionalize industrialization at the cost of environmental sustainability, and it defeats the purpose for which EIA was conceived, and hence thought should be given again. So, guys, this is all the matter or thinking line on which you will be writing. So, that's all. Now, we'll go to the next question. Now, the question number 2 says that in the present context of global climate challenges, biotechnology has the potential to increase food production, reduce pesticide damages to the environment, and create alternative fuels from renewable sources. Now, the question is very straight. It is just asking you the advantages of biotechnology, and even the areas has been mentioned. Now, friends, first of all, we will be starting the introduction by giving or telling the introduction of biotechnology into the 21st century. Now, we can put the one dimension, that is the population. Now, guys, every year world population is expanding at the rate of 80 million people, and by 2060 the population will reach 10 billion, and by no possible means the area under the agriculture can be enhanced. So, the food security of such large people can only be met by bringing certain innovations, and that innovation will be the technology. Moreover, it will even be a bigger problem because as the climate challenges are coming, large areas will become unfit for cultivation and therefore will be even decrease into the net sown area, and therefore the importance of biotechnology will be even more bigger. So guys, the biotechnology can work on two fronts. Number one, making the crops climate resilient. Number two, enhancing the productivity of the existing farms. Now guys, when we talk about these features, then the genetically modified crops play the most important role. Now, by genetic modification, certain traits can be induced into the plant species, such as the herbicide resistance, pest resistance, viral resistance. The ripening of the plant can be controlled. Then, the fungal and bacterial resistance can be enhanced. Quality improvements can be done. And the most prominent example of this is the golden rice, in which three genes, that is PSY, LYC, and CRTL, have been introduced into the Japonica rice by the agrobacterium mediated transformation. And now, by the synthesis of these three elements into the rice, it leads to the better synthesis of the beta carotene into the body. And the beta carotene is very much essential as it kills the free radicals and is effective against the cancer. So by this example, we can see that how the quality of food can also be improved. And guys, by this, the problem of a hidden hunger can be solved into India. Moreover, it has been seen. We can take the example of the BT cotton, by utilizing which the per hectare productivity of cotton has been improved. Moreover, guys, in the countries such as USA, Brazil, and Argentina, the genetic modified crops had led to substantial enhancement in productivity for crops such as soya bean, maize, papilla, squash, etc. Now, so far, the food production and food security we had discussed. Now, guys, talking about the pesticide damage. So, into the biotechnologically modified crops or into the genetically modified crops, we often use the term BT. So, BT stands for the Bacillus thuringiensis, which is a soil bacterium. And guys, its spores contain a crystalline protein which releases a toxin which binds and causes the insect death. So guys, automatically they repel the viral and insects, and therefore they had inherent protection against the insects and pests. So therefore the pesticides will not be utilized, which causes the toxicity into the plant, into the environment, and when they leach into the soil, they also pollutes the water table. Moreover, not only against the pest and insects, but the BT crops also have the viral resistance, as they contain the protein structures which avoids the replication of a virus, and therefore protects the plant. And now, if we talk about the renewable or alternative fuels, then the first example we can take of the biodiesel, which is extracted from the animal fat, vegetable oil, or the crop such as sunflower, soybean, etc. And the most important advantage of biodiesel is this, that it is sulfur free, therefore there will be no PM 2.5 pollution and will save the environment as well as people's health. Second is that it doesn't have the carbon footprint compared to the traditional hydrocarbon fuels. And apart from biodiesel, we can also take the algae based fuels, which have been successfully tested even by the US Navy for their calorific value. Moreover, guys, they can be produced very cheaply as well as into much large quantity onto the wastelands. So, this could be a sustainable source of the fuel without compromising onto the food security. So, guys, on all these aspects, you can write your answer. So, that's it. And now we'll move to the next question. Now, question number 3 talks about the e-waste. So, question says that on one hand, India is repositioning itself as an electronic manufacturing giant as an IT office. of the world, but on the other hand, e-waste management poses unprecedented challenge. Discuss while suggesting suitable solutions. Now, India is repositioning itself as an electronic giant due to Government of India's interventions such as Make in India and the National Policy on Electronics 2019, which tries to make India global hub for electronic system design and manufacturing, popularly known as ESDM. Moreover, guys, the critical components such as semiconductors will also be developed under the National Electronic Policy of 2019. Moreover, owing to the large population and the substantial part of that population being the young demography, India reaps the demographic dividend. And guys, due to this demographic dividend, nearly 70% of global digital talent is right now present in India, due to which there is huge potential into the growth of IT sector also. Moreover, guys, since 1991 LPG reforms, the service sector has assumed the prominence into India's GDP, and out of the service sector, the major proportion is coming from the IT sector. Now, on one hand, all such prospects are good for the economic well being, but onto the flip side, there are the ecological concerns, and the most important is the generation of the e waste. And guys, if we talk about as of 2019, India is the fifth biggest e waste generator into the world, and every year the e waste for more than 3 million metric ton is discarded. Now there are large number with respect to the e-waste management in India. Now guys, first of all, the e-waste management is done by the untrained laborers into the informal sector, and they lack expertise with respect to the e-waste collection, their transportation, their segregation, their dismantling, and the processes such as recycling, due to which the lethal elements out of VE waste such as the lead, barium, etc., are leaked. Moreover, guys, when we talk specifically about the computers, then the computer monitors contain the cathode ray tubes, which contain various heavy metals such as the cadmium, lead, etc. And all of this ends into the unscientific landfills and destroys the water table as well as surrounding environment. Secondly, guys, due to the e-waste pollution, much lethal diseases such as cancer, respiratory disease, etc., also occur. Moreover, e-waste problem is not only accentuated by the internal sources, rather the developed countries such as the West has made India as a dumping ground, and nearly 80% of e-waste collected by US is exported to India as well as other developing countries. Hence, in this particular direction, government has also framed the e-waste rules of 2016, which had brought substantial measures. First of all, guys, with respect to the e-waste, the extended producer responsibility has been instituted, under which it is the responsibility of the producer that he need to collect the e-waste once his product had reached an expiry stage. Moreover, guys, apart from the EPR, the deposit refund scheme has also been initiated under the e-waste rules, where a person, when buying the electronic good, needs to give a deposit which will be refunded when it will be discarded properly after the end cycle of that particular good. However, both of them has not been implemented properly, due to which the e-waste rules are there onto the book but has not been properly implemented. Moreover, guys, under the new e-waste rules, the responsibility has been onto the producer with respect to the collection of e-waste. So responsibility has also been fixed, but again the implementation has been very poor. So now we talk about the solutions in this particular regard. Number one, India should closely work in cooperation with the Basel Action Network, which works against the dumping of e-waste into the developing countries, so that the external waste which is coming in India can be curtailed. Secondly, there is the need of new e-waste rules 2020, which can focus onto the reprimand and reward scheme, so that the accountability of the industries to collect the e-waste can be restored more effectively. So guys, if done good, then reward, and if not, then reprimand. And or with the help of these industries, even the informal sector which is involved into the collection of e-waste, they can be trained by the industries, so that they can work as an extended arm for the collection of e-waste. So two problems will be served: the large number of informal workers will get a formal employment, and secondly, e-waste generation capabilities will also be solved. Then, thirdly, the classic strategy we will always be using, that is a triple R, which stands for recycle, reuse, and refuse whenever is not required. Then, guys, fourthly, we need to work actively with the SARC network, as this is the e-waste is the problem in all the countries, and a collective action should be taken so that the technology transfer and the best practices could be transferred, as how collectively this problem can be solved. Then, fifthly, a kind of a polluter pay principle also needs to be installed. So, guys, the industries which are generating the e waste can be held accountable, and their responsibility can be fixed. So, on all this thinking line, you can write and can explore. So, that's it. Now, we'll move to the next question. Now, this question says that the food processing industry has proven to bring multiplier effect in South Asian tiger economies. Do you think the Sampada scheme holds a similar potential for India? Now, there have been four South Asian tigers, that is Hong Kong, Singapore, South Korea, and Taiwan. And in all of them, the agricultural capabilities have been very much limited, and due to it, they had focused onto the food processing in order to conserve their meager resources, and had the FPI shown much result into these economies. But not at all, we need to mention about more than that about the South Asian tiger economies, because the question is not at all on them. It is rather a fallacy just to divert your resource of time as well as space into the South Asian tiger. So please be apprehensive of that. Now, Sampada scheme. But before going into the Sampada, we will talk about the importance of FPI in a economy. So FPI has a large number of, first of all, it enhances the nutritional aspect of the food. For example, by food fortification, we can induce much needed nutrients. For example, the quantity of zinc can be enhanced into the wheat. Then, guys, through the FPI, the shelf life of food can be increased, which leads to the reduction into the wastage of food. Moreover, as FPI is inherently connected to the agriculture, the reallocation and remobilization of excess labor from the agriculture sector can be made into the food processing industry, due to which there will be the two advantages. Number one, the burden onto the agriculture will be reduced, and the disguised unemployment that is there into the agriculture will be solved. Secondly, there will be the better wage allocation to the people, and the diversification will also come. Hence, on all these aspects, the food processing holds the great potential, and into the country where the 60% population is directly and indirectly involved into the agriculture, there the FPI becomes even more important. Thus, to support the food processing, in 2016, government came with the Sampada Yojana, whose name was changed in 2017, and it was made as Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sampada Yojana. Now it has seven components. What is first is the development of the mega food parks onto the hub and spoke model, so that there is an FPI and it collects the raw material from all the nearby region. Then the second component is the integrated cold chain and value addition infrastructure, so that the farm gate wastages can be reduced. Third is the infrastructure for agro processing clusters. Then there is the creation of backward and forward linkages. So guys, backward linkages and forward linkages, farm to FPI to supermarket, all these things will be done. Then the expansion of FPI and preservation capacities, Then the food safety and quality assurance, because the processed food is also an export commodity, and due to the stringent sanitary and phytosanitary measures, India's export consignments are often rejected. So here it will be helping. Then the human resource and institutions will also be developed. And guys, all this will be solving the problem of the food sector in India. So friends, this is the entire thing which we need to write here. We can expand these seven components, and you can even write an essay on this particular dimension. Now on the sidelines, if you want to go into the details, then guys, the subsidy linked capital will be provided for building all such infrastructure. Moreover, there is a target that more than 5 lakh job creation should also be done under the Sampada scheme. So guys, that's all. Now we'll go to next. Now, guys, the question talks about the land reform. It says that land reform 1.0 were carried in India to protect tenants, but now there is a need to bring land reforms 2.0 to instill confidence into land owners. Justify it along with initiatives taken by government in this regard. Now, first of all, guys, please don't make a mistake of writing extensively onto the land reforms after independence, because it has been stated into the question just for a reference, and our major emphasis needs to be onto the present land reforms, that is 2.0. However, still we will give a brief background of land reforms 1.0, that is the post independence land reforms. Now guys, systematically Indian agriculture was strangulated by Britishers by their revenue policies such as zamindari, raiyatwari and mahalwari. So systemically by them, the land revenue was so much overhyped that holding the land became a luxury, and ultimately from the hand of peasants, land fall into the hand of the zamindars, landlords and mahajans. So at the time of independence, the tiller was not the owner of that land, and in this particular direction, the land reform started. And the examples such as the Gramdan, Bhudan, Operation Bharga, all are the associated with the land reform. Now, guys, the land reform came in various stages, such as the tenancy reforms, where the protection of tenant was ensured, and it became the major pillar of land reform 1.0. So guys, the zamindari abolition law, Bengal Tenancy Act, Bihar Tenancy Act, etc. were installed because the tenant was to be given the ownership of the land, so that the concentration of land into the hand of few can be reduced. And guys, even the land ceiling acts were also passed, so that surplus land over a limit can be freed, which can further be given to the tenants. So guys, the centerpiece into the land reform 1.0 were the tenant. But as the time passed, tenants became so powerful that even the genuine landowners started to fear that they can hold the ownership of the land if they were given the tenancy. And as of now, there are large tracts of land which are lying vacant. The owner cannot cultivate them, but at the same time, he is not willing to give them to the tenant because of the excessive protection that has been given by the tenancy laws. And now, guys, you know that there are the four factors of production, that is land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. And if any of the factor will be logged, then the growth cannot be achieved. So guys, due to the fear into the owners, the land is locked, it is not being utilized for the productive purposes. So now the land reform 2.0 is needed, so that a confidence is instilled into the landowners, so that they can sublet their lands, they can give their land on the rent for the industries, for the ventures, and for other such kind of activities. And here, as a part of government initiative, we will introduce the Niti Ayog's Model Agricultural Land Leasing Act of 2016, where the aim is to reverse the apprehensions which has been brought by the land reforms 1.0. So guys, under this, the legalization has been given to the land leasing, as it will bring the agricultural efficiency, equity, agricultural productivity, and the logged land will be utilized for the much needed and usable purposes. Moreover, guys, the security is being guaranteed here to the landowner, as automatically after a specific time the lease will expire and the original ownership will be restored. Moreover, the clause of the adverse possession has also been reduced. Guys, earlier what used to happen, if for a particular time the tenant had held a land, then automatically he used to become the owner of that particular land. And now these provisions are being discarded under the Model Agricultural Land Leasing Act. Then, guys, the land deeds will be decided mutually by both the owner as well as a tenant, so that there is no unfair deal on the part of any one. Moreover, it has also provided the provision that the tenants can access the formal credit on even onto the basis of the leased land. So it will further bring the much needed reforms. Then after that, a provision government has also introduced, that is the provision of the land bank, where the small cultivators can deposit their land parcels. There these land parcels will be consolidated into a big land and could be utilized for much useful purposes. So guys, all these are the reforms and initiatives which government has taken. We can utilize them. So that's it. Now we'll move to next. Now, friends, question number 6 to 10th are the 10 marker question. And in these type of questions, you need to write the maximum of 150 words. So you need to be very careful with respect to allocation of your time resource as well as your energy resource. Now the question says that cropping pattern should correspond to water availability and climatic condition in order to be sustainable. Do you think water availability vis-a-vis the cropping pattern has been maintained in India? Now, friends, we know that a large population is dependent on agriculture, and therefore agriculture is important for the food security as well as for the employment security. But the anomaly is that even being so much important, the sector has not been allocated attention for its sustainability. And according to the Asian Water Development Outlook, nearly 89% of the water that is being extracted is singly being devoted to the agricultural crops. And singly just because of the extraction of groundwater, the states such as Punjab, Haryana, as well as Western UP are sowing the water intensive crops such as paddy as well as sugarcane. Now, particularly if we talk about paddy, then paddy wants nearly 100 centimeter of rainfall as the baseline. But the Punjab and Haryana receives just rainfall of 40 to 45 centimeter. Therefore, they are not at all suitable for crops such as paddy. Therefore, the cropping pattern vis-a-vis water has not been maintained. By this particular example, we can see. And guys, in this particular direction, Niti Aayog's water index also characterizes India as a water scarce country, and or has also shown the concern with respect to the declining water table, where the major attributor is the agriculture sector. So we need to make our agriculture sector more sustainable, and in this particular direction various reforms can also be suggested. For example, number one and the most important is the farmer sensitization with respect to the sustainability of agriculture, and he also need to be nudged that how his future generations will be surviving if such kind of a tendency will be utilized. Then secondly, there should be emphasis onto the enhancement of the irrigation network, so that farmers don't need to resort onto the groundwater. And in this particular direction, the Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana can be an important step. Moreover, the initiatives such as per drop more crop should also be pushed further. After that, onto the farmers end also, government should provide the subsidy linked credit, so that the farmer can institute the micro irrigation technologies such as the drip irrigation and other such likewise interventions. After that, fourthly, government should also focus onto the MSP policy. Many a times MSP for paddy is kept high, due to which the farmer is inclined to grow paddy avoiding the environmental and water related cost. So there also government should work. And fifthly guys, government should reduce the subsidy given onto the electricity, due to which the extracting of water which has become very much cheap. So government should bring the draft electricity bill which it has introduced, as it talks about the feeder separation and giving DPT for the electricity generation, electricity utilization. So guys, all these are the interventions which we can write here, and this will be the framework for our answer. So that's it. Now we'll move to next. Now the question number 7, it says that the perishable such as the fruit and vegetable faces gross wastage due to ineffective supply chain management. How supermarkets can play a crucial role into the effective supply chain management. So now guys, into the introduction, first of all, we will explain about the supply chain and their effective management. So supply chain involves the movement of a product from the place where it has been produced to the end consumer. So, into the case of agriculture, the processes from the farm to the consumer's plate are all part of the supply chain. It includes the logistic, it includes the human resource, the preservation, the storage, everything. Now, if the supply chain is not effective, then there will be a lot of wastages, and particularly for the perishable products such as the fruit and vegetable, wastages are much more if the supply chain is not efficient, not fast. Now, how supermarkets can play a crucial role here. So, guys, the supermarkets are very strategically placed, and they have very strong backward linkages, and due to their deep pockets they can directly procure from the farmers and can avoid the middlemen in between. And because of all these avoidances, the process will be very much fast, and into no mean from farm the product will be placed into the shelf, and from here the consumer can buy it. Hence we can see that the supermarkets can play a very important role. Now, guys, according to the Ministry of Food Processing, it has been said that nearly 30% of fruits and vegetables render unfit for the consumption because of the ineffective supply chain. So government should provide the incentives to the supermarkets into the procurement of the products. Moreover guys, the supply chain not only make the supply chain fast, rather it also supplements the farmers income. And according to the International Food Policy Research Institute, as well as by World Bank, it has been said that whatsoever a consumer is paying price, in this only 20% is the share of the farmer, and this 80% is going into the pocket of the middlemen, etc. And supermarkets can play this particular role here and can avoid the middlemen, due to which the price discovery for the farmer can be enhanced, and we can even reach the goal of doubling the farmer's income by 2024. Friends, earlier it was 2022, but now it has been enhanced to 2024. Then thirdly, the benefit is not only of the farmer but is also of the customer, who can get the fresh product into much lesser of the prices. Fourthly, the supermarkets can also give the much needed inputs such as the technological inputs, better seeds, better fertilizer, pesticide, etc. to the small and marginal farmer, in return to get a sure short supply of the products. So guys, in a way, the contract farming can also be initiated by the supermarkets, which will be beneficial for both farmer as well as supermarket. The supermarkets will get an ensured supply, whereas the farmer will get a demand. So friends, all these are the issues which we can write here. So that's it. Now we'll move to next. Now, friends, the question number 8, it says that government's vision of PM Asha was a much needed reform for the MSP regime. Highlight its component along with the analysis as how they can solve the major crisis of the MSP system. Now, friends, into the question, the PM Asha is coming after the MSP. So, in introduction, we'll just briefly explain the MSP. as it is a government intervention where government ensures that farmer gets a fair price onto the sweat and effort which he is giving onto the agriculture. So on MSP, government gives a floor price below which if a farmer gets, then he can sell to the government. And MSP is announced every year by the Commission for Agricultural Cost and Prices. Now guys, MSP is released for the 22 crops before the sowing season starts, and it accounts the cost of sowing, the marginal profit, the cost of inputs, and all such kind of thing. Now into the MSP, government is giving money out of its pocket, and the MSP food crops are being utilized by the government through the FCI to give the food to the people under the schemes such as the National Food Security Act, various other interventions. Now, guys, the thing is that the MSP had led to its own problem. First of all, MSP happens to be the open ended scheme where the government needs to procure whatever they are getting, and in case many a times the allocation exceeds the buffer stock requirements of to the government, and in such capacity the food simply rots into the FCI godowns and is simply of no use. So government is simply paying money for the food that will ultimately be rotting. So in this particular direction, the PM Asha has been announced by the government, which has the three major components. Number one is the price support scheme or the PSS, under which physical procurement of the pulses, oil seeds, and copra will be done by the central nodal agencies, and here the state government will be given the proactive role which was earlier not there. So in a way, the PSS is just preserving the earlier system which was there so that nobody suffers. And now the second element which comes is the most important. So this second element is called as the price deficiency payment system, which was originally suggested by the Niti Ayog. Now guys, here what happens? Here the government will announce the MSP, for example 1500 rupees. Now in a case farmer is getting 1200 rupees into the open market, so farmer will be said that he sell the product into the open market for 1200, and the gap, that is 300 only, will be paid by the government. So it will help on two front. Number one, the government's expenditure or government's payment will be drastically reduced. Secondly, government also need not to bear the cost of transporting that food grain, storage, and all these kind of things. And at the third level, the food will actually reach the market from where it will reach to the customer, and when there will be the much more food availability into the market, the price of the food will also come, which will impact directly the inflation in an economy. And the third component is the pilot of a private procurement and stockist scheme, where the private traders will be allowed that they can procure the food grains at the MSP, particularly from the small and marginal farmers. And as 82.6 farmers in our country are small and marginal, the private sector can efficiently reach to them and can procure their food at the MSP. And these, the private players will be provide a margin over the food that they are getting from the farmer. So guys, in this particular way, these three elements will be bringing the much needed reform. Now guys, the PSS will be restoring all the benefits which were given under the earlier scheme. So price deficiency payment system will be helping the state government, and the PPPSS will ensure the private sector's participation and will ensure that there is the proper food uh, accumulation from the marginal and small farmers. So guys, this is a much needed reform, and that's all about this thing. Now we'll move to next. Now the question number 9 says that the development of infra industrial corridors has been resorted as a time tested strategy for solving multiple developmental problems in India. Discuss. Now guys, this question is very simple, very straightforward, and such type of 2 3 questions every year come into the UPSC exam. So these are the brownie questions, but at the same time they are also a trap. because here you will be having so much of information that you will overflood your information and you will end up wasting your time, which will just be a fallacy and will act as a trap. Now guys, talking about the industrial corridor, we know that industrial corridor are the infrastructural package, as it have a large number of components such as the roadways, the highways, then there will be the railways, special economic zone, and likewise. So guys, the industrial corridors have a particular purpose, that they wants to usher the development from region A to region B. It aims to enhance the connectivity, as well as so much infrastructure will be built around here that it will boost the employment in all the region, and as a result the regional development will come. Now guys, the significance of industrial corridors are immense, but if we talk about the major industrial corridors, then there are the Delhi Mumbai industrial corridor, which is linking the two industrial as financial hubs, that is the Delhi and Mumbai, and it also happens to be one of the world's largest infrastructure projects. After that, there is the Amritsar Kolkata Industrial Corridor. Then there is the Bangalore Mumbai Industrial Corridor, Bangalore Chennai Industrial, and finally the Chennai Vizag Industrial Corridor. And all of them has the same purpose as we had listed. You need not to go into the specific nitty gritties of all the project. Now, particularly the Chennai Vizag Industrial Corridor is the most important one, as it is a much important element into the India's Act East policy and will enhance the capabilities to connect to the east. Now guys, the industrial corridors have large number of incentives as well as benefits. For example, number 1, they prevent the distress migration from the villages to the cities due to the unavailability of employment avenues. Now guys, as they will usher the growth in other regions also, the distress migration will be reduced. Secondly, it will also solve the problem of the regional disparity, which happens to be the hallmark problem of India's developmental process. So guys, as the region specific growth will be coming, the disparities will be reduced. After that, as we had talked, that the industrial development, special economic zone, etc., will also be coming, then it will increase the competitive efficiency of our domestic products into the international as well as into the national markets. Moreover, by this thing, the share of manufacturing as envisaged by the Make in India can also be increased to 25%, which is a goal. Fourthly, guys, into the present times, if we know, then the bohemy between the India and China is going on, where India is talking about the Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, and to carry forward the Atmanirbharta, we need to have the balanced development, which will be brought by the industrial corridors, and at the some gap of time, we will finally be able to condemn the Chinese cheap manufacturing, which had stripped the Indian manufacturing of its much advantage which it could have reaped. And finally, there could also be one more different dimension now we will put, that is the sociological dimension. Now guys, as due to the industrial corridors, the job creation will be there into the nearby areas only, the social links will also be preserved, as people need not to migrate into the distant cities, and therefore the filial as well as conjugal ties will be preserved. So guys, this is the entire thing which we can write here, and there can be even much more things apart from that also, but please don't commit the fallacy of unnecessary writing. So that's it. Now we'll move to next. Now friends, the final question number 10th, it says that recently the government had announced a wave of agricultural reforms. Critically evaluate them in the context of dire state of agriculture in India. So friends, as government unleashed the Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, two things were done for the agriculture sector. Number one, the allocations up to the tune of 1.63 crore rupees was kept aside for the agriculture sector. And second is the structural reforms or the legislative reforms that were brought for the agriculture sector. And here the agricultural reforms which we are talking about will come. So basically, three reforms have been brought by the government in this particular regard. Now, first of all, these reforms have been brought by announcing the ordinances. As you know that right now the parliament is not in functioning. Now guys, discussing them one by one. So first is the amendment that have been carried to the Essential Commodities Act 1955. Now, if you are regular with the newspaper analysis, first of all, we have done the entire analysis of this entire thing, even of the Essential Commodities Act 1955. Now, this particular act provides a limit and provides a curb onto the stocking of certain farm produce which are considered to be essential. So the prices can be controlled. But this price control happens to be a barrier onto the food processing industries as well as onto the stockist who intend to export, because they can also not store above a desired limit. So guys, the amendments were very much essential, and by amending it, a new category has been announced where the prices of the agricultural commodities can only be controlled when there are the situations such as war, national calamity, famine, or extraordinary price rise. So, guys, the first reform is the amendment in ECA 1955, much more needed. Now, coming to the second reform. So, guys, here the Farm Produce Trade and Commerce ordinance was announced, under which it has been said that the farmers can now sell their product wherever they want. Earlier, they were bound under the Agricultural Produce Market Committee Act. And under this particular act, there was a limitation that they can sell their produce into the nearby mandis, and it has been a barrier for a better price discovery. So now they are free, they can sell anywhere. It has been introduced. And even here, the freedom has been given that they can also sell their produce onto the e-market solutions such as e-NAM. So, guys, actually, the One India, One Agricultural Market will be made by the FPTC ordinance. And finally, the third one comes is the Farmer Agreement on Price Assurance and Farm Services Ordinance 2020. And this particular ordinance is very important because it actually institutionalizes the concept of the contract farming, where the farmers can engage into the long term contract with the institutional buyers such as the Frito Lays, McDonald's, etc. Now guys, there have been the problem in this particular institutional buying, because earlier they were farmer can also only send into the nearby mandis, but now as they can sell to any buyer, these buyer can provide in return to the farmer with the modern technology, better inputs, and can teach them the better practices with respect to the agriculture also. So guys, these are the three reforms which has been taken, and they hold the great potential as they will avoid all the structural problems which were there into the agricultural sector, and will also help in doubling the farmers income by 2024, which is the renewed target. Moreover, not only economic benefits will be coming, rather indirectly it will be helping the 60% population of India, which is directly or indirectly dependent onto the agriculture. So it is a most promising reform which has been taken. So guys, that's all about this particular aspect. So with this, we come to a conclusion on all the questions of the test number 5, and I hope that some value addition in your knowledge might have been done by this particular thing. So that's all. Thank you so much.